And I reflected earlier on the testimony around the budget, and the author of this measure left the room immediately after speaking, and I did not want to say this without him being here. But in this empty board chamber, the reality is that, to me, the 800-pound elephant in the room is that for someone who sees himself as the strongest opponent to the mayor, you've done more to reelect him than everybody in this room combined. I mean, I just think that what has happened over the past month and a half.
Supervisor, if you can direct your comments to the body and to the chair, I think that would be most helpful and appropriate, and that goes for every member of this body.
I think that what we're faced with tonight is incredibly frustrating, because we need a mechanism that is going to generate affordable housing. And you see that many of the stakeholders are not in this room, and they have not been knocking on our door because they are concerned that we cannot put ourselves in a three-strike situation where we fail at the ballot for a third time. And regardless of the fact that we've achieved over 60%, this would be a very different campaign when the mayor of this city has indicated that he would oppose this measure and does not see it as being appropriate. And I think that we have to recognize that it is harmful to the city for us not to come together. And I issue this not as simply a challenge to the author of this measure. It is a challenge to the mayor. Yes, SF Hope is part of the solution, but it is not the totality of a solution that we need, so we don't face the issues that we have over 3400 Cesar Chavez, or that we don't have the opportunity to acquire parcels that become available. But the reality is, I don't believe that this measure could pass. I think that there are those that would be naysayers that would say that we would overly tie the hands of budgeting for years to come. And many of us would question whether we would have the opportunity through the budget process to address discrete district and constituency needs that cut across the city in terms of gay and lesbian needs, needs for other communities. And so I simply am frustrated because I am for affordable housing. But I think that we have got to get past our partisanship and on all sides of this, and I think that we have to come forward with something that is going to succeed.
Thank you for that collaborative discourse. Supervisor Mercarimi, you have not yet spoken, and then we will return to the author. Supervisor Mercarimi.
I'll defer to Supervisor Daly. I'll come in.
Supervisor Daly.
Thank you, Supervisor Mercarimi and Mr. President. I appreciate Supervisor Dufty's comments, although I'm not exactly sure what they mean. If we want to talk about who's responsible for elections, let's talk about where money is in politics, and we do that, and we've engaged in campaign finance reform and what have you. And clearly there's been some discussion in the community and then here at the board about whether or not November is the most likely ballot for items to pass. I mean, let's be clear. The most likely ballot for items to pass is November 2008. That's the ballot within the next, 4 years, which will have the highest turnout.
But you're proposing November 2007.
I am proposing November 2007 because we are here in July of 2007. If we were here in July of 2008, I'd be talking about November of 2008. I think that a couple of things. One, this measure would pass in November 2007. And I appreciate the endorser of the incumbent who has a concern about the position of the incumbent mayor on this measure. I appreciate that through the chair to Supervisor Dufty. And I do appreciate the uncomfortable situation that an incumbent on the ballot will have personally not liking a measure that is going to be immensely popular and I would assume would get somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% or perhaps even more of the vote. We know that charter amendments that include set-asides and allocations of property tax do better than general obligation bonds. And on the issue of affordable housing, we've seen general obligation bonds, even on elections that aren't the best elections, receiving high 50s and into the low 60s% of the vote. but with the 2/3 threshold, those measures don't pass. I believe that this measure would be more popular with the electorate because there are certain voters who vote against general obligation bonds because that increases their property tax bill. This measure will not increase the property tax bill, and some voters just go no on those bonds, and they might go yes on this measure. Therefore, this measure has a better chance of receiving even more votes than a general obligation bond that I would assume would poll somewhere in the low 60s on this measure. Colleagues, I've authored, I think, 17 measures over the last 6 years of elections. 14 of those 17 have passed. I think that it's one of the better records. I'm able to sense usually pretty well whether a measure has a good chance of passing. I think this measure has a good chance of passing. If it doesn't pass, I think we should take a look at the history of ballot measures that have appeared on multiple elections, and you'll see that there's plenty of examples of measures very similar or even identical that have received different votes, yay or nay votes on various election cycles. So I'm not worried if there is in the freak off chance of a November 2007 failure of a February, June, or November 2008 passage. And let's be clear, the magic is not a measure failing at the ballot. The magic is a measure passing at the ballot. In other words, a measure passing is more good than a measure not passing is bad. Because when a measure passes, it's very difficult to undo, but if a measure fails to receive support, it always can receive support later. So having said all of that, we've gotten to the point where whether or not we think San Franciscans should have the opportunity to vote on this item at the next election. And I think that affordable housing rises to the level of importance where San Franciscans do deserve the opportunity to weigh in. I appreciate Mr. Chafee's points. They were reminiscent of my good friend Matt Gonzalez, who used to take principled positions, intellectually principled positions against set-asides within the budget. But let's be honest, this is a way that we've moved forward to protect or to guarantee funding for areas of service that we think are important and need some protected long-term funding. And I think for the area of affordable housing where it takes multiple years in order to deliver affordable housing projects, it makes sense to have long-term funding, a protected funding source over a period of time, in this case 15 years, for that program. I would ask for your support of placing this item on the ballot and wouldn't campaign for the measure from my City Hall office, of course, but would do my due diligence to ensure that this measure would pass. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, the road to hell. Let me say the following words. If I had it to do over again on any number of things that I have voted to send to the ballot where it was clear at the get-go that the community that needed to support it to get it passed was not ready to go, I would do it over again. I cannot tell you, and I can point fingers, I can point one of them at myself, but the testimony that I have heard here tonight from any number of people who are the natural supporters of this saying, why don't we, we've got questions, we want changes, let's go for February, let's not go now, is every indication to me that this thing is not ready for prime time in November. That concludes my statement. On the item number 41, to place it on the ballot, a roll call, please.
Supervisor Peskin.
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Sandoval. Yes. Sandoval, yes. Sandoval, yes. Aye. Excuse me. Sandoval, aye. I'm tired. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre. No. Alioto-Pierre, no. Supervisor Amiano. Aye. Amiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, aye. Supervisor Dufty. No. Dufty, no. Supervisor Ellsburn. No. Ellsburn, no. Supervisor Jew. Jew, no. Supervisor Maxwell? No. Maxwell, no. Supervisor McGoldrick? McGoldrick, no. Supervisor Mirkarimi?
Aye.
Mirkarimi, aye. There are 5 ayes and 6 noes.
4 ayes and 7 noes.
Excuse me, 4 ayes and 7 noes.
Charter amendment is not submitted. Next item.